Today, we join with many other faith communities in the custom of blessing animals. The timing is related to the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, which was, technically speaking, yesterday. The association of animals with the saint stems from stories that I'll get to in a bit. But first, just a little bit about Francis. He was born around the year 1181, and his life spanned the end of the 12th century and extended into the 13th. It was a time when the uncertainties, or when the certainties and the stability of feudalism had been replaced by the rise of a mercantile class and the institution of banking. Francis was the son of a wealthy merchant with what we might call new money. The same social changes that made the acquisition of wealth possible also led to the growth of an economic underclass. But it was also a time of boom and bust, leading to a sense of precariousness throughout society. And at the same time, new trading routes were vectors for the spread of disease. There was the intermittent threat of plague. All this added to the sense of disruption. All in all, it was a deeply destabilizing period. Sound familiar? There isn't time to go into the details of Francis's life. For now, enough to say that in the midst of all of this, he was inspired to relinquish the comforts of his social position and came to identify with and serve the poor. With Jesus as his model, Francis chose not to flee from the messiness of existence. He embraced those whom the late Father Robert Capon frequently referred to as the least, the lost, and the losers. Francis came to see not only other people, but the whole of creation in a different way. Which brings me to those stories involving animals. Mark Vernon, a psychotherapist of the Jungian variety and writer who also holds a PhD in ancient philosophy as well as degrees in physics and in theology, has made something of a study of Francis. In a recent podcast, Dr. Vernon told two of the tales of Francis and animals. In the first, he tells, Francis and his followers were finding a place to say their daily office. And the noise from the birds in the trees around them was so much that the brethren complained they couldn't hear themselves speak. And so Francis speaks to the birds, and he discovers that they are offering their own office, that they're preaching their praise to creation around him. Francis realizes that they are collaborators. He invites the birds to turn the volume down for a few moments so that the brethren can say their words, which of course the birds do. And then the brethren and the birds pray together. And Francis realizes that all things are offering praise to God. In another story, it's about a wolf, the wolf of Gubbio. Gubbio is a town near Assisi, somewhat in the wilds, in the mountain wilds, and the story goes that there was a terrible wolf haunting the streets, killing people. And so the people of Gubbio reach out to the son of Assisi and ask Francis to solve their problem for them. Francis comes and visits, and he, of course, speaks to the wolf. He enters into the heart of the problem, addressing the source itself, and befriends the wolf and invites the wolf to set up a new arrangement with the people of Gubbio. If they will feed him, will he, the wolf, not feed on the people, but instead become part of their community? Which is what happens. Dr. Vernon concludes by saying, it's a lovely story that the people of Gubbio become friendly with the wolf and ask the wolf one day, sometime later, what happened. And the wolf says, well, I became a Franciscan. The wolf goes on to say, I knew that I could find greater riches in life by being poor myself, not trying to be possessive, but instead receiving from you Gubbians. Both stories, of course, have their fanciful elements, chock full of them. But even fantasy can point to some profound truth. At any rate, the kind of spirituality that these stories point to connects us to the whole of creation, not as something purely to be conquered, nor as existing only for our own human use or abuse, but as fellow creatures to be respected and cared for. The Canticle of the Sun, attributed to Francis, which we just recited, casts what God has created not as objects, but as our siblings, our brothers and sisters. Think brother sun, sister moon, brother fire, sister water, and all that. It's not just Francis piously preaching to some birds, and centuries later we have statues of the saint gracing the bird baths in our gardens. It's Francis in an encounter with birds wherein they preach to him, and he recognizes the kinship of humanity and nature. In that second tale, it's Francis facing a problem, seeking reconciliation between wolf and townsfolk, where both sides have their needs met and reconciliation is achieved. Which, this morning, raises a question. How do we see the rest of creation? As something entirely separate from humanity, existing purely to gratify human need or desire? Or as interrelated entities, worthy of respect because in their very being, each element of creation praises the Creator? How many of you talk to the animals you live with? And what might they have to teach you? Sure, there's a danger here of anthropomorphizing animals, that is, attributing human characteristics or behavior to them. But there is also the possibility that in our relationship with them, we may glimpse some important truth and become the wiser for it. For example, I remember the first person I ever heard say, I truly do want to become the person my dog thinks I already am. What does your canine companion say to you about living life well? What might your cat, resting in a patch of sunlight, suggest about the virtue of taking time to simply be? Just a few examples here. As for me, I live with a pair of parakeets. At one time, I had 4, each in a different color, each one beautiful, together even more so. They shared an aviary and a single food dish without conflict. The message, to me, a difference in pigmentation is a ridiculous excuse for discrimination. And diversity is beautiful. When I said this to a friend yesterday, he said, yes, but birds have different brains than humans. And I said, well, maybe it's better sometimes to be a bird brain than a human. My avian housemates help each other with the task of keeping their feathers in tip-top shape for flight. Sure, it's an evolutionary adaptation, but could there also be a lesson here about the wisdom of both giving and accepting care from others? Anyway, the stories about how Francis related to animals suggest that, like the old song says, all God's critters got a place in the choir. And so today we bless animals, an action we are rightly drawn to do. Let us then recall that all creatures, great and small, bless us as much as we might bless them. Let us resolve to listen to what the rest of creation has to teach us. Let us never forget that on this fragile earth, our island home, we are not alone. And we were not made to live for ourselves only. And so with all of creation, let us praise the Holy One who made all things bright and beautiful, each in their own way. Thanks be to God.